Welcome to the Tech Pathfinder podcast, where we explore the impact of technology on the people in your workplace. Hello and welcome to the Tech Pathfinder podcast, where we explore the impact of technology on the people in your workplace. I'm your host, JP, and I help businesses get the most out of their technology through the engagement and support of their people. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing how the solution to getting the best performance out of your people is more often a human response, and certainly more human than you might think. In order to extract the most out of our people, first we need to understand them and their motivations. Doing this works on a team level, but how do we tackle this on an organisational level? And how do we do this in a more repeatable way? Today, I'm joined by John Hibbs, co-founder of software company Coefficient. John believes businesses should be a force for good and helps businesses around the world capitalize on their amazing human talent. He likes to spend his time thinking about the interconnections that form our work, community, and lives, and how these can be enhanced for the benefit of all. A serial entrepreneur, an experienced businessman, John enjoys achieving results in a win-win world. Welcome to the show, John.
JP, nice to be here.
Before we jump into today's subject, it'd be good to hear a little bit about yourself, your background, and of course your company, Coefficient.
Yeah, thank you. So I live in a very tiny island. It's called Guernsey. Many of your listeners may not have heard of it. It's part of the British Isles, actually in the English Channel, closer to France. So that's where I live. I grew up here, I was born here, had an idyllic childhood, really, until I became a teenager and realised that Guernsey was the most boring place on the planet. So I made a beeline for London with all my mates. And now I started my first business, which was a personal training business. I was lucky enough whilst I was in London, to meet a fantastic Aussie, a guy called Les Hercules Callis, who became my business coach, and he really opened my eyes to business. I was fascinated with how businesses operate, and it was very clear, even from sort of back then, 25 years ago, the way that Les was talking about business and how the world works is everything sort of filters back to people, or everything starts with people, I should say. I then, Les and I have been working together for 25 years now, and so I ran my personal training business for about 10 years or so. Then I moved back to Guernsey. It was amazing, actually, how Guernsey became much cooler the older I got. So moved back to Guernsey, ran a few businesses over here, helped grow a few businesses, and what ended up starting Coefficient with a couple of good friends. We've been running this for a couple of years now, and Coefficient it measures organizational performance, but from the human perspective. A couple of good reasons why we do that. One, we believe that all businesses are simply groups of people trying to rub along together and improve the world for another group of humans. They happen to call those humans their customers. What companies often do to measure their success is actually they count up how much money they make, which is an interesting proxy for actually trying to improve the lives of your customers. And probably carries with it some negative perceptions we as a society have got around business, because now we think, well, businesses are all to do with making money. And of course, that's not solely what they are. And also, money is the laggiest of all indicators. It comes right at the very end of the chain of events that are our businesses. So if you want an earlier lead indicator, then probably the best place to go for that is your people, because they know everything. Who's cool, who's not cool, what's working, what's not working. They have all these wonderful insights. And if they can share those insights in a meaningful way, then that's a start of an improvement process.
Yeah, let's jump into that. And I think when I'm, thinking about a workplace, maybe a client or, a place that I've been in before, that you're right. The focus on performance is on success metrics that are at the end, whether it's completion of sales, completion of solutions implemented, products sold, happy customers. It's kind of like the the output of of a successful workplace. Where do you see the human connection aspect happening, or I guess being that leading indicator of future performance? How do you know that just because someone is happy in their job and feeling psychologically safe, is it just a matter of ticking those boxes and understanding, well, if those things are in place, then we're going to see successes in the other metrics?
Well, remember that businesses are always a chain of events, aren't they? So to make money, you've got to, for example, send out some invoices. To send out some invoices, you've got to get some work done. To do some work and to make it profitable, you've got to do it in an efficient and sensible way and have decent processes and what have you. To get work into your company, you have to have those relationships with your potential customers, and they have to know you and trust you and feel safe and have confidence and all that sort of stuff. All of those things are created by and managed by humans. So, if you can, I'm not saying that you stop thinking about all of those parts of the process. Far from it. I'm not saying don't try to improve your processes, of course. But actually, you get the biggest bang for your buck, really, from trying to think about your humans and how they're feeling and how they're behaving and how they're working together as a team. How psychologically they're safe is key. Are they confident that they can be creative? Are they confident that they can try new things out without kind of getting told off? So there's a very clear connection between humans and the end outcome.
I think the experience that a lot of people would have is a hindsight one. Like everyone's been in a workplace or an environment that has gone downhill, whether it's because of market factors or whatever the case may be. When times get tough, you kind of look back and go, well, I kind of saw this coming because the company culture was falling apart 12 months ago, or I saw this coming because there wasn't a trust, or at an employee level there wasn't an innovation culture. It was almost a closed-in culture because everyone was afraid to mess up because there was this fear of losing your role or getting reprimanded for doing the wrong thing. So the risks were too high. We see that as a post indicator, like we look back and go, we should have seen it coming, all of these signs. So I guess what you're doing is looking at those signs and going, well, how do we correct before we get to the inevitable negative impacts? How do we correct and have a positive impact on the business?
Absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we try to do. Those sort of negative impacts, when they occur, they are often, well, not catastrophic, but they're always painful. Like good staff leave, you lose loads of money. There's a lot of negative energy around that, a lot of negative feelings. All of those things filter out of your company and into the homes and the families of your staff and your customers. So if you can get a sense of that much earlier on in the chain of events, and you can actually do something about it before they become a calamity. And that's exactly what we do. So we measure across 19 core attributes of good business, including mental well-being. We measure things like a sense of belonging, psychological safety, purpose, values, risk, training and learning, all sorts of things. And it enables businesses, and oftentimes the consultants and the coaches and the HR specialists who are working with those businesses, to really pinpoint areas of concern from the staff's perspective. Now, we're not saying that the staff are always right, but what we know is that if you want performance, that comes from knowledge multiplied by action. And the more hearts and minds you have around the knowledge table, the better your knowledge is. So we don't say, look, sign up to Coefficient and all your problems are solved. Far from it. We say sign up to Coefficient and use it to increase your knowledge with the other metrics that you're already using and the conversations that you're having, and you put it all together in your data lake, if you want to call it that, and hopefully you can start making better decisions out of this hugely complex soup, which are our businesses. Businesses are filled with people. We're all pretty complicated or complex beings, aren't we? We're emotional and messy and not always logical. And businesses are just collections of these kind of sometimes a little bit crazy humans.
Yeah, I had a chat a few episodes ago with Theatre around connecting hybrid teams. And one of the things that she spoke about was creating an environment where empathy was something that everyone took the time out to sort of have involvement and engagement, not only in the meeting, but in the people in the meeting as well. And have a greater respect for, not only the purpose that you're there, but understanding why everyone else is there, and understanding the person behind the employee number, I guess. From your experiences, where do you think empathy plays a role? Obviously, we know, I mean, most of us can agree that empathy is a really important skill for a leader to have, a manager to have. But as a business or as an employee cohort, how important is that empathy across the different silos of a business to the success of a business?
So it's a good question, that. And so a couple of points. All of the data that we collect, empathy is absolutely critical, I believe, but also so is awareness. So as a leader, you need to be aware of how you are coming across to your staff. And what we see a lot of in the data that we collect is a massive disconnect between the leadership team and the management team or the directors and everyone else. So they have one view of what's going on, which is usually very, very positive. And the view from everyone else is very different. So, we see that a lot across different industries and sectors. The way that our platform is set up, we have we've got about 10 subject matter experts that help us shape the questions and the modules and the categories and how it all kind of hangs together. And leadership is the one that filters into the most categories. It almost touches on everything. So if you're talking about psychological safety, it's leadership. If you're talking about risk, it touches on leadership. If you're talking about purpose, values, culture, it touches on leadership. A sense of belonging, a sense of connection, how much support you get. It's all leadership. So leadership is key. And then so that having an empathetic leader is really important, but having the awareness of how you're doing is also really, really important.
I think about organizations getting access to this sort of information and understanding, okay, yes, people are feeling strong in these areas and maybe not so strong in other areas. This is a bit of a devil's advocate question, but do you think, is there a way that, I guess, have you seen in some of your clients where people have necessarily gone down the wrong road and used the information not necessarily for evil versus good, but sort of misinterpreted the information and misconstrued what that means in terms of how to turn the ship around if someone is feeling unsafe, feeling disconnected from the organization?
Yeah. Okay. So we've never ever seen anyone use the data for bad.
For ill. Good.
Never seen that, which is nice to say. We have a quite an interesting business model, because as a data analytics platform, we want to be truly agnostic. So we don't make recommendations to companies what to do next, because if we did, then we could be accused of tailoring the results to skew our certain perception of the world and our coaching style. So,
Yeah.
but what we do is we partner with coaches and consultants and HR specialists, and then we say, use our data. We're pretty certain the data we get in is good data, and then you can work together to tailor a plan for the businesses that you're already working with. And this works really well because we end up working with fantastic consultants who know the business already. They will already have a feeling and an instinct of kind of what's working and what's not working, and they will have had conversations with many people. The data then just layers over that with graphs and numbers, and help them do their job. So the companies so companies fall into two buckets. One, they either engage and make progress and make change, and change is usually a positive energy exercise. Or some of our customers, they never do anything wrong, but it might be difficult to undertake the next steps. And we often see that with companies that don't actually come via a consultant, because of course the change step is such a big one. It's difficult, and if you're already in house, let's say you're head of HR or something, you've already got a shit ton of work to do anyway, and now you've got to come up with a sort of a change management process and lead it. It becomes, I'll do that tomorrow, I'll do that next week, I've got this other stuff to do that's a bit more pressing. So that's the only really sort of two scenarios that we see.
I think you're right in a lot of HR today, and I think fairly consistently is the intent and the desire is to do strategic and engaging people work, but what ends up happening is you end up doing firefighting. You end up problem solving within organization, which is why a HR professional is such a valuable asset to the organization, because they are putting out the fires and dealing with things that are put on their plate every single morning and every single night, but right before home time, that's when the doorbell rings. That's when the email comes in. So I think definitely providing a way to articulate that, and the storytelling aspect is really important with data. We're seeing a lot of organizations start to place, certainly in the last 5 years, start to place a lot more weight on people data in general. So you're seeing specialist roles in HR. The larger organizations are having business analysts with a HR background coming in, analyzing the data, help build that narrative. On an organizational level, how then do you, in your experiences, how do you have that conversation at an executive level, for example, where you see you've got the data, you understand where the gaps are in the organization, you put a plan together. What do you think is the key to successfully implementing or getting buy-in, at least at an executive level, for sort of organizational change for people?
Yeah, I'll come back to that because you just made an interesting point. You're right. So if we look at like the world over the last 100 years or so, we've seen sort of three kind of horizons. Sort of like World War II, and just after, we saw a lot of industry and processes and things were changing and coming onto the scene, and we were seeing huge efficiencies there. Instead of like one man building an entire car, you get 100 men to do it, and each would just do one specific thing, and it was a lot more efficient. And then sort of like in the 80s, sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, we moved into like a computer era. And, that gave us, again, huge, better communication and much more super efficiencies. We're seeing diminishing returns on all of those things. And we're moving into a realm now, into an era where actually it is the people. We understand that if you get a great team of people together and they're resilient and they're around a shared purpose, then actually everything becomes easier because they just work together. And yes, of course, you're going to make mistakes. We all do. And but actually, it's how you cope with those mistakes. So moving into this new era, it is a people data time, I think, and there's going to be winners and losers. And the winners will be people who understand, or companies that understand the power of their people. So getting sort of buy-in, and actually this is one of the things we measure is how the propensity of your organization to welcome change. What we're seeing is we're living in a world which is changing faster than it's ever changed before. The pace of change is faster than it's ever been before, and it's probably never going to be this slow again. And so getting that buy-in is essential. Now that's again quite a complex issue, because one, you need sort of to feel emotionally safe at work or psychologically safe at work. You need to feel that you're part of something bigger than yourself. But it also filters into sort of your own individual background and how you feel about the life and how you were raised and your risk appetite and all of these things. So change, or starting a change program, actually, you need to be starting to think about that well in advance and be very clear as an organization, sort of who you are, what you stand for, how you're going to evolve. Because if you can articulate, we are an agile company, we're looking to change, etc., then people who don't like to change probably won't even apply for the job in the first place. But I think it's having that courage, all of us, companies and human beings, to be able to stand up and say, hello, this is me, genuinely and authentically. This is what I stand for. This is what I believe in. This is what I want to happen, etc. Oftentimes we see companies saying one thing, and then once you're inside, it's something completely different.
Very different. Yeah, I think for me, it is about that storytelling aspect, and when you're telling a story, whether it's trying to pitch a solution to a problem, whether it's you're trying to sell something, whether you're literally sitting in front of children telling a story, you need something. You need to understand the motives and the motivations of the person that you're telling the story to. Otherwise, they're not going to be interested. If you're if you're reading a book about wizards to someone who doesn't really have an interest in fantasy, then that's going to go over their heads and they're not going to pay attention. And I think from an executive level, it's very much the same. You need to really clearly understand what are the business objectives, what are the strategic objectives that the executive have laid out. They'll tell you. They know the direction they want the business. They'll tell you what's important to them. And at a high level, it's going to sound, it might be a little bit hard to draw that link between, people and humanizing the workplace to our goals are profit, and profit, or a subset of, or a variation of, grow customers, increase revenue, decrease risk. That might be, how do I draw that link? And it's about understanding, being able to sell that narrative and clearly articulate using the data. And I think that's key, having clear information and clear data to help articulate that, to say, this is how you achieve your goals. If we go back to what's hampering you going from here to here, it's engagement. It's buy-in from your people. A lot of the metrics that you're talking about seem quite, they're not something that, it's not binary, it's not black and white, it's not an easy thing to necessarily capture. How do you go about, I guess, finding that balance to get the the correct responses and the human feelings out of individuals, particularly if they're they're not necessarily feeling great about things. So there's fear of retribution. If I tick a box to say, this place is the worst, what does that process look like?
So a few things there. First of all, if you run a company, you have to employ, everyone has to be smarter than you. So that's what I've done. So luckily I've got an amazing team of data analysts and psychologists and people like that who really care about how we get hold of this data. Because of course you're trying to get data out of humans. It's really, really tricky. And just waking up and having an argument with your kids can put you in a bad mood all day, and it's got nothing to do with work.
Mm.
on the face of it, but of course that energy filters into work and vice versa. So we're very careful how we um, get a hold of the data, how we treat the data, and how we display it. We're also pretty clear on what the data can and cannot do. So coefficient is not going to solve anything. It's not. It can provide you with great insights, and that's it.
Mm.
We spend a lot of time shaping the questions and how they're worded, so that we make it really, really simple. A lot of the questions are almost binary. They're not quite, but they're almost binary. And then it's taking that data and as you say, turning it into some kind of story that makes sense to the staff afterwards, and being open and transparent and sharing that information. Companies, they have pressure from their shareholders, don't they? About it's got to be profits, it's got to reduce risk, but all of that can actually be reframed into a much more human story. Like, if you want to make more profits, what you really want to do is like serve your customers better, and that's a much nicer story that can be empowering, something to wake up to. I mean, who doesn't want to try to improve the world in some small way, even if it's for a subsection of society, for something that they care about and they're passionate about. And so, one of my dreams for life is just if more people were doing more things that they were slightly more passionate about, and working in jobs that they cared about, even if it's just a small percentage, then that could have huge positive ramifications going forward.
I think everyone who has been in a workplace that they've really enjoyed, they've really been attached to, emotionally connected, felt safe, you personally have gotten better outcomes out of yourself in that workplace.
Absolutely.
100%. Like, it's
Absolutely.
a guarantee that if
Yeah.
you're happy in the workplace, and it's not necessarily about working harder or putting in extra hours or anything like that, but you're emotionally invested in the business's success,
Yeah.
and you go that extra mile because you don't see it as going that extra mile. The minute you're in a workplace where you feel undervalued, taken advantage of, maybe just not engaged, then going that extra mile does feel like another mile.
Well,
And
you just don't do it. Then it becomes a
yeah,
paycheck. I'll come here, I'll do the bare minimum, take my money, thanks very much. You don't care about me, I don't care about you.
100%. And that there are millions of people in jobs that feel like that, and but the businesses that are succeeding are the ones that have higher ratings on these sorts of scores, but also rank as best place to work, or rank as feedback that coming out of employees that that's I'd recommend my friends to come and work at this place. um, we've heard a lot about AI,
Yep.
and obviously the impacts on there's a couple of things around AI that I wanted to ask you about. Firstly, on the data side, do you see a shift in, or I guess where do you see the shift in leveraging these huge models and engines to process data to be able to find information that people might not necessarily be able to see in a short amount of time? Like, do you see it evolving, not specifically coefficients directive and how they operate, but just more broadly in a people data sense? How do you see that impacting the world?
Well, yeah, I mean, AI is hugely powerful, isn't it? It's going to have huge impacts. But I think that we seem to be moving into a world where people are forgetting that we're all human beings. That's the whole reason why any of us do what we do. It's because we're human beings, caring and loving either ourselves, hopefully, or our families or our friends. Nobody would go to work and do a job they didn't like if they didn't have bills to pay, and they wanted to stay safe and have kids that they've got to feed and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, nobody really knows what's going to happen with AI. But one of the things that does concern me is that we're forgetting that we're human beings, and that we're humans at the core, and all of our businesses and institutions and governments and schools, they're all just there trying to help each other. That's all they do. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know if you have it in Australia. I'm sure you do, but like the automatic checkouts in supermarkets, where people go and scan their own produce and pay, and you don't even need to speak to a human being. So I was in the supermarket yesterday with my wife, and I noticed at our local supermarket they've increased those sort of self checkout tills. Yeah. They've doubled them, 8 to 16 or something, and it makes me really sad and I don't use them, because every time you use them, you're basically putting someone else out of a job, and you're drifting more profits into a smaller minority of people, and increasing the amount of poor people in the world. So, and we see these newspaper articles of like, oh my gosh, like the CEO owns 400 times more than the lowest paid person. Well, technology plus greed, greed's a real driver here, and laziness from our point of view or something, it is enabling that. So, I always stand in the queue, and okay, I've got to stand in the queue with some other human beings for 5 minutes. Yeah. Well, guess what? I might have a chat with one of those people, and that's the start of something. Rather than headphones in, listening to a podcast, unless it's this one, and then you should definitely be.
I was going to say, if you're going to listen to a podcast, make sure it's a good one. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And I remember when those automated checkouts just started coming out, and I can't remember where it was. I don't think it was in Australia, but it was somewhere in the world where they were running. They had a particular checkout that was a slow checkout, and because they were in a community with a lot of elderly that were living by themselves, and they needed that connection. It was one of the few opportunities they had at connection was talking to the person at the checkout at the supermarket during their weekly shop. So that human connection is critical. I literally used one today, and I hate them. The automated checkouts, they never work. And now because they're worried about protecting their profits, they weigh everything. Okay. So if you put something in and it doesn't register on the scale, the little red light goes on. So you end up talking to the one person who's running back and forth between the 16 different machines. In here in Oz, we've got there's the two major chains. There's also a few smaller chains. And one of the smaller chains is Aldi, and they kind of go. I think Lidl is the equivalent in the UK. I don't know if Guernsey has graced the German supermarket, but it's a completely different experience. You do have a little bit of chit chat with the person, but you are in that moment. It is the sportiest thing I do, and I go to the gym. It is the sportiest thing I do in my week is going through the checkout, and they scan it super quick. You bag your own stuff, but the space that you've got to collect the stuff is really tiny. So it's the challenge. So I went away. There was not an Aldi where we were, so we went to Woolworths or Coles or one of the bigger chains, and watching someone else bag, I can't watch them bag my stuff anymore. It takes too long. It's a sport to me now. I need the thrill of the pile getting too big, and the discerning looks from people going, "Oh, just put it in your trolley, stop packing it in your bag." So
there's a process, isn't there? I mean, like, you can't put your eggs at the bottom, for example.
No. So
right.
look, I've made a game out of it, but that's just how my brain works. But you kind of answered my second question around AI, and that's kind of the impact on the workplace is going to be where, to an extent, I think the individual workforces will contract slightly. Some businesses are using it as an opportunity to increase productivity without necessarily increasing headcount, but there are that example. AI through robotics is another example where we're shrinking the workforce significantly. I think that what it means is there's a much greater importance for everyone in every role to have those soft skills in place. Communication,
Mm-hmm.
empathy, leadership, all of those skills that we kind of take for granted are going to become, those super skills that we are looking for on resumes and that we're testing for and trying to understand, because that's what AI will never be able to replace, is that empathy aspect.
Yeah, absolutely. And that human connection piece, and, a smile and a
Yeah.
handshake, and all those really important things that, we're missing out on. Just on the supermarket thing, I don't know if you've got them in Oz, but Amazon now do shops where you just walk in and take what you want off the shelves. It's all
Yep.
automated. You don't even talk to anyone. And there used to be a time when you'd leave your house and you'd be talking to people all the time as you
Mm.
sort of walk past them in the street, or when you interacted with them. But now all those little mini interactions have been removed.
I think we see that in the cities as well. Like those passing "hi, how you goings" don't really happen in a big city space.
Yeah.
But as you start to move out into the regions, out into the country, people say hello, and it's almost jarring as a city boy to see that at first, and then you kind of relax into it and go, oh, they're asking how I'm going. It's a genuine "how's it going?" Like
Well, come
and
to
that's
Guernsey.
the thing we need.
You can hardly walk down the street because you're saying hello to so many people all the time.
Well, I'm gonna hold you to that, and I'll definitely be paying you a visit at some point in the next couple of years.
Excellent.
But look, John, it's been an absolute pleasure. We got on a supermarket tangent, but I loved it nonetheless. Thank you so much for taking the time out and joining us today.
Pleasure. Loved it. Always nice to have a conversation with you, JP.
Cheers, John. Take care.
Are you looking to unlock the true potential of your business? At Coefficient, we understand that every organisation is more than just numbers. It's a group of individuals with unique insight and experiences. We know that your team hold the keys to your success with their knowledge, ideas and actions. Coefficient is here to bridge that gap between what you know and what you do. Our platform allows more hearts and minds around the knowledge table, empowering organisations to thrive. Join us at Coefficient and turn your business into a powerhouse of human potential. Visit our website at coefficient-solutions.com and see the difference for yourself. Coefficient, where knowledge meets action. Thanks to Coefficient for supporting this episode.